There is a plant that appears 4 times in the Bible, and every time it purifies something. A plague-stricken house, a dying leper, a man condemned to death. The same plant, the same purpose, across thousands of years. And the herb they were using? It is sold in every health food store in America, under the wrong name. And modern laboratories have now confirmed what every ancient priest already knew. It was used to cleanse houses marked by plague. It was bundled into a tool and dipped in blood to protect entire families from death. It appears in the crucifixion, handed to a dying man in his final moments. This is not a footnote in scripture. This is a plant that shows up at the most critical moments in the entire biblical narrative. And here is what makes this stranger. The people who used it were not mystics performing empty ritual. They were following instructions so precise, so consistent, that modern microbiologists looking at those same plants in the laboratory found something nobody expected. The dominant compound in this herb does not just inhibit bacteria, it ruptures their membranes, it collapses their energy systems, it kills them at the cellular level. For 3,000 years, this plant sat in plain sight, in kitchens, in spice markets, on breakfast tables across the Middle East. And the Western world walked right past it. Because somewhere along the way, the name got changed, the knowledge got buried, and a different plant, one with no cleansing properties, ended up in its place. That is not an accident, that is a pattern. And this plant was not erased because it failed, it was erased because it worked, without anyone's permission. Welcome to my channel. Every video unearths one more secret they forgot to bury deeper. Picture the night of the Exodus. Inside a house in Egypt, a family takes a bundle of a small, fragrant herb, dips it in blood, and marks their doorway. Not with a random plant, with something chosen. It had to bend without breaking, hold liquid, work as a tool, and everyone there would have recognized it instantly. In Hebrew, that plant had a name, Azov. And for the people who lived in the biblical world, Azov was not mysterious. It was not some rare ritual object kept behind temple walls. It was ordinary. It grew on hillsides, dried on rooftops, ended up in kitchens. We turned it into a symbol. They treated it like a substance. In 928 CE, the Jewish scholar Sa'adi Gaon translated the Hebrew Bible into Arabic. When he came to the word Azov, he did not hesitate. He wrote Zahatar, not because he was guessing, because to him, this was obvious. The biblical purification plant and the everyday Levantine herb were the same thing. 3 centuries later, Maimonides, physician and the greatest Jewish legal mind of the medieval world, made the same identification. Not a symbol, not a metaphor, dinner. The plant they were both pointing to is known today as Origanum syriacum, also called Bible hyssop or Syrian oregano. But then the West got involved. As the text moved from Hebrew into Greek and from Greek into English, Azov became hyssop, and that single shift sent the West in the wrong direction. The hyssop sold in most American garden centers today is Hyssopus officinalis, a European plant. A plant with no roots in the biblical landscape, no place in the Levantine kitchen tradition, and no cleansing properties whatsoever. It simply inherited the name through centuries of translation drift. The real biblical herb was never lost. It was renamed, misfiled, pushed out of view. And while the West went looking for scripture in the wrong shrub, the original plant stayed exactly where it had always been, in kitchens, in spice jars, and on breakfast tables. 3,000 years of encoded memory, hidden inside a herb people were still eating. But here is where the story stops being historical and starts being uncomfortable. The dominant active compound in Origanum syriacum is called carvacrol. It attacks the cell membrane directly, destabilizes the wall that holds the bacterium together, collapses the energy system inside, and then the cell ruptures. In 1999, researchers at Wageningen University tested carvacrol against Bacillus cereus, a bacterium responsible for serious food poisoning. Carvacrol drained the bacterial cell of ATP, its entire energy supply, and disrupted the membrane so severely that the cell could no longer function. It collapsed. Oreganum syricum essential oil was also tested against 3 of the most common molds found in homes and food supplies: Aspergillus niger, Fusarium oxysporum, and Penicillium species. Strong inhibitory activity against all 3. Then, carvacrol was tested against Streptococcus pyogenes, the bacterium behind strep throat and scarlet fever. Electron microscopy showed membrane damage, cellular leakage, and bacterial death, not suppression, destruction. And a 2025 study found that carvacrol combined with tobramycin showed promising synergy against MRSA, one of the most dangerous drug-resistant pathogens in modern hospitals. And carvacrol is not a synthetic compound developed in a pharmaceutical lab. It is the dominant active compound in a plant people across the Middle East have been eating for breakfast every single morning. The chemistry was there the whole time. This was not only folk memory anymore, it was peer-reviewed science, pointing at the same plant, the same cleansing logic that an ancient family used to mark their doorframe 3,000 years ago. So, why have you never heard of this? Because here is the part that should make you furious. At some point, this stopped being a story about scripture, language, and chemistry. It became a story about law. In 1977, Israel placed Oreganum syriacum under protected status. On paper, conservation. In practice, the conflict became far more charged than that, because the people who had been gathering this herb for generations, Arab and Palestinian families who dried it on rooftops, mixed it into za'atar, and treated it as part of daily life, suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of enforcement. Fines, confiscations, court cases. For picking a plant their grandmothers had picked before them. The official rationale was protection, but critics argued the burden fell disproportionately on traditional gatherers, while the deeper conflict involved conservation policy, commercial-scale harvesting, and the survival of a food culture that had never separated kitchen from medicine, or herb from identity. And then the market did what markets always do. It substituted inferior blends, diluted mixtures, powdered fillers with no real herb content. The fraud became so pervasive that an international food standard had to be written specifically to combat it, requiring that authentic za'atar contain at least 75% Oreganum syriacum, and prohibiting powdering so the ingredients could still be visually identified. And in the West, nobody talked about any of this. The plant got a different name. The conflict stayed invisible. And the herb that had been used for 3,000 years ended up mislabeled on a shelf, if it ended up there at all. You cannot patent a plant that grows wild on a hillside. You cannot build a supply chain around something families have been growing in their back gardens for 3,000 years. This plant did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it succeeded, without anyone's permission. The good news is this: you do not need a permit, a supply chain, or a pharmaceutical company to get close to this plant. Oreganum syricum is still available today. In the United States, it is often sold under names like Syrian oregano or Bible hyssop, through Middle Eastern grocery stores, specialty herb sellers, and some health food suppliers. The important part is the label, Oreganum syriacum. Not just oregano, not just hyssop. The specific plant matters, and if you want to grow it yourself, it is not difficult. It likes full sun, well-drained soil, heat, dry air. Plant it once, and under the right conditions, it keeps coming back. Dry the leaves, crush them. Mix them with sesame, sumac, and salt. Or steep them in hot water for a tea that families across the Levant have used for coughs, throat infections, and respiratory illness for generations. That is not a supplement. That is not a patented formula. It is a spice and an old remedy that stayed alive in kitchens while the explanation around it was forgotten.